Man, we're like 2 seconds post disaster over here. I couldn't find my headphones, which doesn't seem like it would be a disaster, except the audio without the headphones is real brutal. So mission accomplished already. let's let's find a nice comfy seat. Nice to see you guys. So just something that feels supportive for the spine. Start to feel into the fluidity of our breath. Give ourselves about 60 more seconds here just to center in. And as you feel right, as you feel ready, let's exhale and allow our chin to come down towards our sternum. As the chin tucks down to the sternum here, just start to gently rock side to side with the head so that we get just a little sensation, more or less at the base of the cervical spine as you're moving. And eventually, we'll lift our head back to neutral. And from neutral, we're just going to start to roll big circles with the head. So try to think about kind of keeping the chin at a level plane so that as you go back, the chin doesn't really pull up, doesn't really tuck down as you come forward, but more or less we just try to get into the big lateral capacity of the cervical spine. Obviously, there's going to be a little tilt and shift to the chin, but that's not our focus here. Eventually, we're going to reverse the direction. Just really feeling into those corners. When you feel balanced, we'll bring the head back to neutral. Let that kind of cerebral, I'm not even going to try, fluid, rebalance. And then let's turn our palms up. And as the palms turn up, lift your chin. And then we'll bring our head back to neutral. As the head comes back to neutral, just slide your hands behind you. This can be either palms away from you, so diamond thumbs and index fingers together, or you can interlace the fingers, whatever feels most comfortable for you here. And then wherever the hands are, we're just going to lift the shoulders up. So shoulders squeeze up, and then shoulders roll back, and then push the hands down. So we have those diamonds. We're just going to slide the hands down. If we have index fingers, really drive into the thumbs. and then start to squeeze into the core so we get a little bit more neutrality there. And then start to pull the hands up, but keep the elbows where they are. So elbows at the same height as where they are. The elbows start to bend and the arms start to, the lower half of the arm starts to pull up. And just keep that mid body. Get to the point where you feel like the shoulders are fully loaded, and then just squeeze the shoulder blades back. And then relax that arm musculature. Shake that out a little bit. That's a big ask right out of the gate here. And let's recenter ourselves. And take your left heel and tuck it in closest to your tailbone. And we'll walk ourselves forward into a little fold. Think of this as both kind of the interplay between the lumbar spine and the hips, and an opener for the lumbar spine and the hips. So just trying to create a little sensation around this mid-body trunk space. Ah, nice, Tony. And we'll walk ourselves back up to vertical and switch the heel space. So right heel comes closest. And then walk ourselves back out into that same sensation of fold. Doesn't have to be a mirroring fold, right? We may have some variance in the openness of the hip capsule, but we're working towards sensation in the hips and low back. And then when you feel balanced, we'll walk ourselves back up into a seat. Stay with that right heel closest to the body. We're going to slide the left hand palm down to that medial edge, so kind of in the thigh, and use a little pressure from that hand to rotate towards the right shoulder. The right hand can sweep behind you if the shoulder feels like it's open enough, or the right hand can come to the lateral edge, that outside edge of the right thigh, to help twist. So either way, use that right hand for a little guidance, but make sure head, neck, lumbar, and shoulder feel okay in the rotation. And then we'll come back and we'll switch the foot direction. Left heel comes closest. Press with that right hand, start to rotate. Left hand either comes to the outer edge of the hip, or it can reach back and behind you if the shoulder's okay with that much rotation. And we'll come back to neutral. Let's take our hands and interlace them behind the head. Thumbs are down the lateral edge of the neck here, and the thumbs are kind of hooking underneath the skull itself. Then just start to pull the hands up towards the ceiling and get some nice elongation of that neck. So it's a little manual lengthening of the cervical spine here. And then keep the neck kind of engaged as you release the hands. So we have all of this cervical spine length. And we're just gonna hold this seat for a moment. So almost like there's some stiffness in the neck musculature. We're just really encapsulating this length we've put in. And then try to keep your awareness on your neck as you transition to hands and knees tabletop. So you end up with that same amount of neutrality. Really, it's about the neutrality and the length when we get into tabletop. And we'll do just a little bit of movement here. Curl your toes, lift the knees maybe like a half inch. So it's like a tenth of a rock back, maybe a hundredth of a rock back into down dog. And then release. And now the weight's a little bit further back, right? So we got just that lift, and weight's further back. Flip the tops of the feet and sink back, but don't let the head drop. So sink back into child's pose, but keep the head nice and neutral, gazing straight down at the mat. And then when you can no longer go back, start to walk your fingers forward, maybe like a half inch, maybe an inch and a half at the max. until you feel that lat musculature start to really get active. And then once the lat musculature is active, let's turn the gaze over the left shoulder. And then tuck the chin down like you're trying to look under your left armpit. And then slowly untuck the chin and roll back to neutral. And then we'll gaze over the right shoulder. And then tuck the chin and try to gaze under the right armpit. Untuck the chin. Use the fingertips to pull your torso back into tabletop, curl the toes, lift the seat, and slide your way back into down dog. Posterior chain, gonna feel probably extra restricted because we've opened up a lot of the high posterior chain. Low posterior chain is gonna feel extra restricted, so you can walk that out a little bit. Really think about getting a little bit of movement, a little bit of weight shift. And then eventually we'll walk ourselves forward and find our way into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let the head go here, settle here. Think about releasing completely into your version of fold. And then drift your awareness to your sacrum. We'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, stacking through the lumbar, through the thoracic, eventually through the cervical spine. When you get into that top space, no rush to get there, but when you do, keep the thumbs pointed forward. So kind of palms pointed towards the thighs and squeeze the shoulders back. Now push the head upward, but try to keep the cervical spine really neutral like we did when we manually manipulated. So we get really like rigid. Like imagine you're Ross Perot, basically, right? We have that like super rigidness in the body, standing as tall as we can. And then squeeze the shoulders back just a little bit more. Splay the toes out wide. Lift the chin up towards the ceiling. Squeeze the shoulders back just a little bit more. Tuck the chin down to the sternum. Squeeze the shoulders back just a little bit more. Bring your head back to neutral. Drop the shoulders down away from your ears, but keep that nice retraction. And then relax your hands. So now torso really rigid, but arms are relaxed. Head is neutrally extended away from the torso. Legs have some level of rigidity just for the stability. And we're gonna take a half fold. So arms are just gonna kind of float towards the floor as the torso tilts. Keep those thumbs pointed towards the front of your mat. And then splay the fingers out as wide as you can. As the fingers splay out, feel how that interplays with that lower posterior chain. And then relax all the way into your fold and find that extra bit of space. Again, we didn't really work with the posterior or the lower posterior chain again, but the upper posterior chain now has created enough room for the lower half of the body to get some space. Let's walk back into our down dog. Now we can kind of experience the shift here just from shoulder placement, right? We basically just got into mountain, we stood still, and we kept rolling our shoulders. And now feel how much room we have in our down dog. Take that space, that length, press into the fingertips, reach through the tailbone. Let's come down to hands and knees. We'll flip the tops of the feet and sink back and into child's pose. This is a standard child's pose, so your version of child's pose that feels supportive. You don't have to worry about where your head and neck are. You're just sinking into a shape that feels like it is offering you a landing spot. We'll give ourselves about 15 more seconds here just to land and ground. And then we'll inhale, feel our fingertips reach into the mat and connect if they're not already there. Then we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Hands and knees tabletop, we're going to curl the toes, lift the seat, and find the way into what will be the last down dog of class. And we have a standard point for our last down dog in class. Pay attention to how the shoulders feel. If they feel like they've started to restrict once again, that's okay. And then when you're complete, let's come down to hands and knees. And from hands and knees, we'll extend the legs out in front of us, transition into a staff, traditional seat, legs extended out. Take a nice gentle bend of the knees so that there's a little bit of slack in the system, and just offer yourself into a easy fold. So something that doesn't feel like it's a prison sentence for sure, right? Just something that feels at least breathable, best case supportive. Give ourselves about 25 more seconds here. Now, when you're ready, we'll walk ourselves back up to a nice vertical spine. Let's bend our left knee so the kneecap can point towards the ceiling space, and then just compress that in. Take the right toes and really accentuate them pointing straight up towards the ceiling. And then once you feel like you've gotten all the compression out of the hip on the left side, let's release that left leg down. And as the left leg comes down, we're going to turn our torso so that we can get the right hand on top of the left thigh. Left hand's going to come behind us, and we're going to go into this really open twist. So generally when we're twisting like this, we either have the hip closed or we go the opposite direction. Here we're open, we're twisting into the open side. Think about using that right hand as leverage and draw the left shoulder not only back, think about rolling it, twisting it so deeply that it starts to point back towards the right front corner of your mat. So we're really rolling into that shoulder. At the same time, keep the awareness on the right foot, that accentuation of toes pointed straight up, and try to get some of this anterior abdominal space to get into the twist. And we'll come back and we'll fold down the middle of the right leg. Balance the weight across the hips. So there's this young woman who lives with her father, her stepmother, and a couple of stepsisters. And her stepsisters are not nice. In fact, even outside the home, in the community, they're known as the wicked stepsisters. And this young woman spends all day just cleaning the home. A lot of the time, she can kind of make it a positive experience. When you're right, when you're ready, let's walk our spine back to vertical. We'll extend the left leg down the mat and then bend that right knee and give yourself that hug and compression. Really trying to get some hip flexor and anterior hip crease compression. And when you feel like you've created as much as is possible, the right knee is going to fall out wide. The left hand's going to come on top of the right thigh. And we're going to, let's see, I'm all backwards. And we're going to twist that open leg. So again, because we're working towards the open side, there's more room. And we want to make sure we accentuate that with the shoulder retraction. So left hand can be of assistance, but right shoulder is pulling back. Those toes are pointing straight up. And we want to feel, or looking to feel, across this anterior abdominal musculature. And then eventually, we're going to come back to neutral and let our body settle into this fold. It's a pretty unique openness here. Working with the body into the open side of the hip capsule to twist is just a very different experience than our normal twist. So as you get into the second side fold, as we're balanced out now, really feel how the low back is respond. And it's kind of, it's not sacral side, it's more of the thoracic side of the lumbar. Really think about where you can use that space to lengthen the fold itself. And so no matter how clean this young woman gets the house, the stepsisters, the stepmother are just hounding her constantly, saying she missed the spot on the floor when she clearly didn't, making her go and get all the cleaning equipment out and scrub it down the entirety of the floor again. When you're right, when you're ready, we're gonna walk ourselves back up into vertical. Bring the left leg so that it mirrors the right, so bottoms of the feet can come together here. And then we're going to hug the knees up as the elbows push down. So hands clasped over the toe mound. The knees are going to squeeze up and the elbows are going to push in the opposite direction. And as you're creating that isometric pressure, you're also going to start working towards fold. So elbows and knees are pushing in opposite directions and your head is reaching out towards the front of your mat. And again, we're looking for that same spot, that high lumbar for the expansion of the shape. The more you use the leg energy, the more the back's going to open up. So the legs are determining how much the arms are working, but the legs are also determining how far we can get into this fold. And then we'll walk ourselves back up towards vertical. Let's make sure we have both our blanket and our sphere handy, and we're going to lower ourselves onto our back. And as you settle on your back here, feel into that soft tissue around the lumbar, especially. Obviously, the entirety of the body can let go, can be our point of relaxation, but just bring a little bit of additional awareness to how that soft tissue around the lumbar is responding. We worked pretty hard to free up the hips, to free up the shoulders, so that we could get into that midpoint softness. And let's just take that in for a moment. So very often, this young woman finds herself just crying because of how poorly she's treated by her family. And it's not all bad. She has really good connections with the nature that's around the house, the birds, the bees, even some of the rodents in her seem to have this connection. Give ourselves about 30 more seconds here just to appreciate what we've done, and then we'll do a little bit more. When you're right, we're going to take our blanket from shelf fold. So if it's towel, it's kind of halved, and then we'll make that hot dog fold. So we end up with kind of our traditional hot dog shape. And we're going to take our spear and place that inside the blanket stack. Now, if you have a ball that's a little bit softer, like a tennis ball, maybe you won't have to put it inside. If you're using a lacrosse ball, inside, just so we have a little bit of softness. And then we're going to place that underneath our neck. So we're looking for kind of a midpoint of the neck for the ball to hit. The blanket is more or less there to provide a little bit of extra height and a little bit of softness if we're using a really dense ball. You don't necessarily need it, but even with a tennis ball or something softer, you may want to have a blanket or towel underneath just to get a little bit extra height. And then let's bring the bottoms of the feet together and let the knees fall out wide. And as that happens, try to get the ball from that midpoint of the cervical spine to right at the base of the skull. So we have a little bit of grippiness from either the texture of the ball or the blanket itself. And we're just going to get that right at the base. And we want to find some pressure right at the base of the skull. At the same time, we don't want the ball to be tilting the chin down towards the sternum. So we want to keep some neutrality. And that's why we're working from that midpoint and then pulling down. So we don't have to force the chin down. We just feel into that pressure. And we're just going to breathe here for a moment. You have the opportunity here, as the pressure at the base of the skull is completely under your control, right? So you can push the head back. You can pressurize with cervical spine musculature to create more sensation. And if that feels really good, feel free to add some sensation there. And if it feels like it's too much, you can always drop the ball deeper into the blanket itself. So you can take it from the middle fold and place it underneath the blanket. If we find this spot right at the base of the skull, though, this is a real nice opportunity to reset the nervous system with just a little bit of simple pressure. And we'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. So one day, this young woman is out in the town and she's running errands for the family. And she comes across this post, and it has a sign on it about this huge gala that's going to go on. This gala is not something that happens very, very frequently. It's the royal family holding an event so that they can find their son a partner. It says everyone is invited. When you're right, when you're ready, let's slide that whole blanket structure out from underneath our head. So head can come down to the mat. Ooh, and we can just allow that space, that cerebral fluid to just move within the spinal column itself. Eventually, we're going to take our hands down by our waist, palms up, externally rotate the shoulders, press down into the toe mounds and heels, and lift yourself into a little bit of a bridge. Just check in here, feel the sensation of length, and then release your tailbone back down to the mat. We'll take the blanket and go from hot dog fold to a half fold, hamburger fold, and create a block-like shape. And the next time we lift ourselves up, we'll slide that blanket underneath the tailbone for a little settling. Remember that you want the fold to run across the body so that you have an equal amount of stability on the left and right side. Obviously, if you have a block, you're welcome to use a block here. But blanket or folded towel can work just as well. We just want to make sure that we have equal amounts of density and stability on the left and right side of the torso, tailbone, body. I'll just breathe into this. At the same time, now you have all of that awareness in the neck. Try to maintain that length. So I've done a couple of things in this class where we've been elongating the neck. We've been keeping the chin from tucking down into the torso here, into the sternum. Make sure you're trying to keep that same level of length in the cervical spine as we settle into this supported bridge. So this young woman brings this news back to her stepsisters, and they are very clearly upset that she has found out about this event. And so the stepsisters go to her stepmother and they make sure that she's going to have infinite amounts of chores to do on the day of this gala. And sure enough, that weekend, when the gala is to be held, she's presented with this list of chores that is 5 or 10 times longer than it's ever been before. And she just looks at the list and it just crushes her inside. She goes to complain to her stepmom and she just is told, do the work. And she sees her stepsisters and they're all getting fancied up for this event. And so she just gets to work. And as she gets to work, her stepsisters are making bigger and bigger messes, intentionally slowing her down. Every time she cleans a room, they go in and they scuff the floor. Just as her stepsisters are leaving, she finished cleaning and she runs into her stepmother's room and she says, I'm done. And her stepmother hands her another list of chores to do. About 40 more seconds here in this shape. And she goes back and she looks at the list and it's 10 times longer than the list she was just given. And she just starts to break down and cry. And at some point during her tears, this woman appears. And she introduces herself as the fairy godmother. When you're right, when you're ready, let's push down into the toe mounds and heels, lift our belt line, and come slide that prop out from underneath us, come back down into this neutral alignment, kneecaps pointed towards the ceiling, cervical spine nice and long. Let's take our right leg and extend it down the mat. Bring your left knee into your torso. Give yourself that little hip compression. And then release the left foot back down to the mat and let the left knee fall out wide. So right leg's extended down the mat, left knee is in half butterfly, arms open towards cactus. And then turn your gaze over towards your right elbow or right hand. If that doesn't work for your neck, you can feel free to stay in neutral. And then take your left hand and extend it towards the wall behind you, palm up. And then start to peel that left hand over towards the right side of your mat, like you're trying to reach to the right corner of the room behind you. At the same time, push that right leg out, maintain the neutrality of the right side of the body as the left side of the body is starting to curve. And then we'll relax the arms back to cactus. Lift the left knee, extend the left leg, and bend the right. As the right knee bends, let the hands slide over the shins. Give yourself that little hip compression. And we release the right foot, right knee comes out wide, gaze over towards that left elbow or hand. We settle into the shape, ease into the shape. And then eventually that right hand is going to extend towards the wall behind you. And then we'll start to slide that right hand over towards the left side, like it's trying to reach the left back corner of your room. Left side of the body stays neutral. Right side is trying to bend and extend. We're getting that lateral line expansion. Big lat opener. When you feel balanced left to right, that right hand can return back to cactus. Left knee comes back up and extends down the mat. Both thighs come in towards the rib cage. Right hand to right shin, left hand to left shin. Give yourself a nice little squeeze. Release the feet back down to the mat. Push down into the toe mounds and heels. Lift yourself into a nice little bridge. Same as you come into bridge, Slide the hands underneath you. You can either do that diamond, so palms down, thumbs and index fingers together, or interlace the fingers and push those thumbs down towards your heels. Whatever feels best for your shoulders. If the thumbs and index fingers are together, it's obviously a much easier opportunity to bend the elbows. Well, feel free to make whatever choice feels most appropriate for the shoulders here. And then we'll release the hands. Let the tailbone come down to the mat and start to rock the knees side to side. Little lateral sway here. So this fairy godmother stops this young woman from crying, casts a couple of spells. All of the cleaning is done. She's whisked into this beautiful gown. And these perfectly crafted glass slippers are made for her. And she heads off to this gala just in time. She's probably the last person to arrive, but she arrives. And as this prince of this royal family is dancing with all the women in the community, he finally makes his way to this young woman. And he just becomes smitten with her instantaneously. Next time the knees fall over towards the right, let's allow them to stay there. And so these two start spending more and more of the evening together. And as everyone else starts to go home, this young woman and this prince are up, laughing and giggling, and just enjoying each other's company. And the royal servants come in and they start to clean this giant ballroom that they're in. Give ourselves about 50 more seconds here on this first side. When you're right, when you're ready, we're going to bring the knees back to neutral. Slide the hands back down by our sides. Push down into the toe mounds and heels. Lift yourself into a little bridge. Slide the hands back underneath you. You can either go palms down or fingers interlace, whatever feels most appropriate for the shoulders. Think about creating space across the shoulder girdle. Neutral through the torso, shoulder girdle opening to whatever's available. And then we release the hands, release the tailbone back down to the mat, let the knees fall over to that second side, the left side. Oh, we just settle into this twist side too. And so this royal cleaning crew started on the other side of the ballroom, but they're slowly working their way over towards this young woman and the prince. Young woman and the prince are seated at this little table, and everything in this ballroom is cleaned to perfection, except this little table they're seated at. And a member of this crew asks this young woman if she can hand over this plate and this cup. And the young woman hands it to the servant. And then, for whatever reason, the servant loses their grip. The plate and the cup fall onto the floor. About 40 more seconds here on the second side. When you're right, when you're ready, knees come back to neutral. Hands come down by our sides, press into your toe mounds and heels, lift yourself into the last little bridge of class. Slide those hands underneath the tailbone once again. Palms can be down, fingers can be interlaced, whatever feels appropriate. And then think about opening up the shoulder girdle as you take this last little opportunity for bridge. And then we'll release the hands, release the tailbone, let the body come back down into a comforted, supported space. Let your eyes close, let your awareness drift within you, and ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need before Shavasana. If there is, offer that. And if there's not, just feel free to slip into a shape where you can fully appreciate some stillness. And so as this plate and this cup fall to the floor, they bounce on this marble tile and just their contents splay out everywhere, revealing, creating this massive mess in this perfectly cleaned area. So as these messes spread across the floor, there's something that happens in this young woman. She sees this mess and she sees that her time with this prince has been disrupted, and she gets up and she starts angrily shouting at the servant. And she catches herself and she sits down and she apologizes and she tries to explain to him, that her stepsisters throw messes on the floor and make her clean them up. And it just created this response in her. We'll start to move our fingers and our toes. And he looks back at her and he says, there's no excuse for becoming miserable. Not even if someone was miserable to you yesterday. And with that, he excuses himself and he walks out of the room. Movement up into your wrists, your ankles, your elbows, your knees, up into the hips, the shoulders, hips, mid-body starts to move. We start to experience all that work we've done. Head and neck. Eventually, we bring enough movement into our body that we can transition from the shape we are in back into a seat. From the seated space, spine gets tall, breath is fluid, eyes closed. Feel into the seat and the ease you've created. And with our next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that although it is impossible to fix yesterday, you are 100% in control of creating tomorrow, and see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Nice to see you guys. Lisa and Skip, welcome back. Heck yes, love the heck out of you guys. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move. And if you want to recharge, we'll do this again next Sunday. Love you. Have a beautiful day. Mwah.
Thank you.
Thank you.